Wade Davis is a native of British Columbia who simply cannot resist using his knowledge and environmental clout to continue to fight for Indigenous people, their land, and their future. When he's not in some remote place, he lives in Washington, D.C., or at his fishing lodge in the Stikine Valley in northern British Columbia, where pristine wilderness in all of its glory is seriously threatened. It is my pleasure to welcome anthropologist, ethnobotanist, explorer extraordinaire, my friend, Wade Davis, back to Studio 4 to tell us more. Hello, friend.
Hi, Fanny. How are you? Congratulations on your 2000th show.
I know. Do I look 2000?
No, you look beautiful.
Thank you. I knew you'd have to say that if I stretched it to 2000. I can't believe it myself. How many questions have I asked you in the past?
Amazing.
It is amazing. So here's to 2001 tomorrow. Let's get through this first.
Okay.
Okay. Take me to the sacred headwaters. I know you've taken me there before. Lay it out.
Well, you know, I think sometimes in Canada we forget how lucky we are and how beautiful our land is, you know, and how rare it is in the world. One of the things about British Columbia that's so fascinating is that until the Panama Canal was built, this was about as far from Europe as you possibly could go. So when you do go to northern BC and you go to the territory, the Tahltan, which is roughly the size of Switzerland, and essentially it's a Stikine drainage, a river that flows into the Alaska Panhandle at Wrangell. You know, when Montreal was entering its 3rd century, and when the Amazon had been explored for 350 years, that part of British Columbia had never had European contact. And whereas in the US, in the lower 48, the farthest you can get away from a maintained road in the whole country is 20 miles. In that northwest quadrant of British Columbia, our home, there's only one road, a narrow ribbon of asphalt that slips up the side of the Coast Mountains to the Yukon. You know, whereas in the United States, for example, their biggest canyon, the Grand Canyon of the Colorado, has 5 million people visited every year. 27,000 people go down it every year by raft. Our biggest canyon that most Canadians can't name, or certainly our wildest canyon, the Grand Canyon of the Stikine, in all of history, has seen but 50 people, the best kayakers of the world, get through it. So it's a kind of place you could throw England and the English would never find it. And also because of its remarkable beauty and its wildlife values, it's kind of known as the Serengeti of Canada. Also, by a kind of wonder of geography, 3 of our most important salmon rivers, the Skeena, the Stikine, and the Nass, are all born in very close proximity to each other in the meadows of what the Tahltan people call the sacred headwaters. You,
who have been to almost every country on the planet, and certainly spent a lot of time in jungles and on mountain tops and beside beautiful lakes and in the Grand Canyon, what did it feel like for you when you first arrived?
Well, I followed that narrow ribbon of asphalt up toward the Stikine in the early 70s, soon after the road was built, to take a job in what is our biggest roadless wilderness park in British Columbia, the Spatsizi Wilderness Park. And my job description as a park ranger was deliciously vague: wilderness assessment and public relations.
Lots of mosquitoes.
Yeah, but very few people. So in 2 4-month seasons, I sort of saw 12 people. And in the course, there was no one to relate publicly to. And in the course of those wanderings, I came upon an old grave that turned out to be a shaman's grave that led to an encounter with a remarkable man, Alec Jack, who was actually a Gitsan elder-in-chief who had lived in that country as a trapper and a hunter all of his life. And for over 30 years, I recorded stories from Alec, traditional tales, mostly mythological accounts of Wiket, the trickster transformer of Gitsan lore, who through his folly taught the people to live on the land. And in a very moving way, just before Alec died at the age of 96, he gave me a gift, and it was a small tool carved from caribou bone that his grandfather had made for him in 1910. And it was a specialized tool used by a trapper to skin out delicately the eyelids of wolves. And it was only after Alec had passed away that I realized in some sense the eyelids were my own. And having done so much to allow me to see that land, old man Alec in his own way was saying goodbye. And I think that connection is why I'm so devoted to the country.
Beautifully said. But on a scale of 0 to 10 in lima beans, where does it stand in your world?
I personally think, and as you said, as an explorer in residence at the National Geographic, I sometimes travel to 30 countries a year. I personally think this is the most extraordinarily beautiful place in the world. And that's why I go back there every season and have done so for 35 years. You know, it's interesting, one of the challenges to the country is through a proposal by Shell Canada to extract methane gas from a coal seam that underlies about 1 million acres right in the meadows of the sacred headwaters. And of course this will be quite an intrusive project if it goes ahead, because in order to frack the coal seams you must drill a great number of wells, you must inject the ground with toxic chemicals in order to liberate the methane gas, and in the end you'll have a network of pipelines and roads and flaring gale heads, mostly to create methane gas that will probably go to the tar sands. But just last week I was at a TED conference in California, and the images that are in this book I was able to project with 6 HD cameras onto an auditorium wall the size of the sky, and in the audience was the president of Shell for North America with his wife, a wonderful man by the name of Marvin Odom. And I think for the first time he realized that this initiative had actually brought the company inadvertently into a place where they were proposing to drill inside the Sistine Chapel. And in a wonderful way, he basically said, you know, this is not what we're about. We don't go where we're not wanted. And with the price of gas having dropped from $9 to $3, you know, Shell, my feeling is that there are no enemies in these kinds of conflicts. They're only solutions. And what my dream is that not only will Shell move out of the sacred headwaters, but to do so in such a way that it joins with all of us to do the extraordinary, to create the most important protected area of Canada, which will envelop the heartland of the sacred headwaters.
And do you think there are other Marvin Odoms leading other companies who will feel the same? Or is there one just not interested, gold, copper, methane gas?
Well, I think
yeah,
I think for example,
caribou, stone sheep, Serengeti.
And this is where the country as a whole has to make a decision. I mean, one of the other great threats, and I should say that within Tahltan territory, again, an area roughly the size of Switzerland, there are at least 41 major industrial proposals. And you know, people hear so much about Enbridge or the controversy about Keystone, of course, the tar or oil sands of Alberta, but these are just elements of this kind of tsunami of industrial development that is sweeping over all the remote wild country of Canada in response to the explosion of commodity prices driven largely by the steroidal growth of Asian markets. And this is something all Canadians are going to have to come to terms with. And it actually gives us the opportunity to actually be a little bit more cautious in how we go ahead with these developments, because it's not as if the opportunity is going to go away.
Right.
This is something we're going to have to be dealing with as a resource economy for a very long time, and that should be seen as an opportunity. Some of the developments, however, are have great promise. Some are of great concern. In particular, what I'm interested in doing is creating a kind of a balance where we have industrial activity in the periphery of country, away from communities, you know, in areas of not ecological conflict, even as we protect the inner core for the tourism business. Never forget that the travel business in the world, and from the Geographic I know this, is a $4.5 trillion business. The entire capitalization of every mining company in the world is not $1 trillion.
Right. Especially now when you consider that they have a glass bridge over the Grand Canyon. It doesn't seem the same as when you and I were in the Grand Canyon, just not the same. A little too touristy.
Yeah.
The natives, the Tahltan, are they in favor of tourism being the driver up there as opposed to industry?
I think the Tahltan, and I can't speak for the Tahltan,
no,
but I think in general they are concerned about not the false choice of the traditional versus the modern, but their rights as a free people to choose the components of their lives. The Tahltan Nation, from all of their public pronouncements, are very strongly unified against the extraction of coal bed methane in a place that is for them their sanctuary, the burial grounds of their ancestors, and they really do believe that the ownership of that land lies with the generations as yet unborn, and that's why they blockaded the one road to the interior for so long. And it was through that incredible brave gesture that there was imposed on the country two-year moratorium, and those are coming to an end now. The other major development that I think is potentially really devastating to the country is that right at the epicenter of this country, where you would put the Banff Springs Hotel, if you were to put it there, is a network of 9 lakes that give birth to the Iskut River, which is the main affluent of the Stikine. Right anchoring that is a wildlife sanctuary in the sky, known to the Tahltan as Totogan Mountain. It is home to the largest population of stone sheep in the world. Vast populations of grizzly bear, wolves. I've never seen such wildlife. And right on top of that mountain, a small company called Imperial Metals, Canada's 75th largest mining company, has secured permits to create an open pit copper and gold mine that will produce 30,000 tons of rock a day, or process 30,000 tons of rock a day for 30 years, generating hundreds of millions of tons of toxic tailings that by the project's design will be dumped into a pristine alpine lake. And I think there are places to put mines and places not to put mines. There are 4,000 copper mines in the world. To put one there is to put one
And surely
in the
we've
Sistine
learned the
Chapel.
lessons, but I don't think we have. But there is a move, as you know, always in these situations to unite miners and First Nations people, to find middle ground, to somehow get the president of Shell to talk to you and find another way, be it at a TED conference or wherever.
Well, I think that's the whole point, and I think there are many developments up there that can go ahead for the benefit of all. But we should also stress that those benefits should go to the Tahltan people. Now, let me cite one example. Eskay Creek, the gold mine and silver mine of Barrick Gold, which is in Tahltan territory, which is just sort of shut down within the last few years. For 10 years, it produced 400 tons of gold, 5,000 tons of silver. At today's market value, that would be, had it been in the ground, $25 billion. Yet if you go to the community of Iskut or Telegraph Creek, where the Tahltan people live, nothing changed in terms of their infrastructure. Still no hockey rink, still no swimming pool, still no trust funds for kids to go to school. The mine itself, in terms of environmental concerns, was exemplary. My concern was why did not more of the benefits of that...
Right, the money doesn't filter back. It's like the polar bear pelts. Yes, they're buying them from the natives, the polar bear pelts in the East, but they're selling them to the Chinese
and I think
for
one of the wonderful things...
thousands, and it's not coming back to the people.
No, and one of the wonderful things about Canada is we do respect the tradition of British law, and that's exactly why we, by British law, must treat with the First Nations, and they certainly deserve to have the benefit of the resources that come out of their own homeland.
A wonderful quote in this beautiful book by James Dennis, and when we come back, we'll talk about him.
Wonderful.
Okay. Wade Davis, our guest, he's an ethnobotanist. Do I have to list it again? He's an anthropologist, he's a poet, he's a scholar, he's a professor.
And a friend of Fanny.
And
That's
a friend
the most
of mine. We'll come back.